afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session focused on sovereignty, supply chains, and partnerships. A few concepts there that we think we know what they mean. They've had established definitions. These are established concepts, but might I suggest these are concepts that are under challenge and that in some ways require reinvention. Across the Indo-Pacific and beyond, we're seeing governments are confronted by a new strategic reality, that technologies that power our economies and protect our security are increasingly entangled with exposure, coercion risk, and opaque dependencies. The assumption that globalization would naturally deliver efficiency, openness, and resilience, I think we all recognize simply doesn't hold today. So rather than framing sovereignty, though, as a zero-sum, decouple, or depend choice, part of this panel's goal is to explore a third pathway, a concept of federated sovereignty, where states combine sovereign control, trusted interdependence, and shared assurance systems to compete effectively against system reshaping rivals. ASPI's recent research, In Whose Tech We Trust, there's a brief advertorial, I make no apologies, it's an ASPI conference, I'm paid to do so, has shown that sovereignty today is not about isolation or unbounded openness, but it does require us to contest with what does trust and assurance look like. Quite lofty ambitions, quite complicated concepts, a lot of uncertainties there. But fortunately for us, we have three great leaders with us to bring three different vantage points. As I said, my colleague Bart introduced Pastora Valero, Senior Vice President from Cisco, Deividas Matulionis, Lithuania's National Security Advisor, and Professor Michito Tsuruoka, one of Japan's leading thinkers on strategy and security. Always dangerous to have that title, Michito. Let's kind of begin with a bit of a foundational question. In terms of concepts of sovereignty, Pastora, how does industry see the trend towards digital sovereignty playing out?
Thank you, James. A pleasure to be here today in Australia and in Sydney at the ASPI conference. I would say digital sovereignty is actually like a fuzzy concept, but there is no doubt that there are growing calls for digital sovereignty, where there is AI sovereignty, where there is cloud sovereignty, where there is digital infrastructure. And I would like to think about it from what we are seeing in three ways that you and countries are operationalizing digital sovereignty. The first one is the control of the digital infrastructure. So who owns the infrastructure, who is operating the infrastructure, who is having access to the data. So that's one trend that we are seeing, and in Australia and many other countries, in Europe, in Saudi, across the board, we're seeing data residency mandates, particularly for sensitive sector like healthcare, like finance. We're also seeing some sovereignty requirements around the control of the infrastructure that I was talking about. And I think in response to these trends, for example, we've launched what we say sovereign critical infrastructure solutions that allow customers and governments to run the technology on-prem, air-gapped. But the one thing to keep in mind is that obviously there is always a trade-off. So if you over-rotate on these sovereignty requirements, you may also, slow down innovation and ultimately maybe even less secure. Yep. So that's just like one trend. The second trend, I think, to your point about high-risk vendors is really many countries, whether it's Europe, whether it's Australia, have been creating frameworks for addressing high-risk vendors. And in particular, they have acknowledged that it's not just about technical requirements, but it's also about sovereign requirements. So those are a little bit, and I think altogether, I think what's important as well, I think it's been referenced in previous discussions, is that like-minded countries work together on what is it, a trusted digital sovereignty. There is an interesting declaration on digital sovereignty that was launched in Berlin by the 27 EU member states on digital sovereignty, and it actually talks about also the need for digital muscle. All countries want to have their own digital companies and digital ecosystem. This is about competitiveness, but to do that also in partnership with trusted partners and trusted vendors. So that openness, and at the same time recognizing that all countries obviously want to have their own digital muscle, I think it's really critical.
I haven't heard that phrase before. I quite like it, digital muscle. Let me, with that digital muscle in mind, and trying to shift from theory to practice, Deividas, maybe to you next. So Lithuania, concepts of coercion aren't abstract, they are real, and they're happening today, and they're persistent. What has that taught you about where sovereignty actually resides, in hardware, in standards, talent, or political will?
First of all, thank you very much, ASPI, for convening this discussion. Actually, I consider this discussion on economic security. And we live in times of fierce competition between democratic states and authoritarian states. And we all know that rules-based order and international law is at risk. Therefore, we have to do everything to consolidate democratic world and try to have a coherent approach between European countries, United States, and Indo-Pacific region. And I will be saying that now we are experiencing a small country, as you were referring to, very clear case of economic coercion. And this economic coercion is by PRC, started 2021 and continued 2022. In principle, this is, it's not openly imposing sanctions against Lithuania, but in a delicate way on the basis of so-called plausible deniability. PRC, deleted Lithuania as a state from world customs system, and actually in Chinese customs system, Lithuania didn't exist for some time. And then there was, some sort of activities pressing multinationals and not to cooperate with Lithuanian component producers, and then it was sort of an issue which created some problems for supply chain in Lithuania. And in this respect, I must admit that we managed to show resilience. And thanks God that Lithuania is not only a small country somewhere in the part of the North Europe, but also a member of the European Union. And European Union support was essential in this respect. And EU started case against China on discrimination against one of the member states in WTO. And at the same time, in parallel, they started discussion on anti-coercion instrument. Actually, this was a trigger to European Union to start. And actually, we have already in EU anti-coercion instrument. That's a very strong instrument. Could be imposed some additional tariffs or sanctions against any third country which, having some coercion policy against a member state. And I think in this respect, I would like to say that political will was extremely important, and also solidarity within group of countries in the European Union. And why? At the moment, our trade with China is restored in principle, and European Union has disengaged on WTO case. And I wanted to repeat, Lithuania always said that we uphold one China policy. But the trigger for this economic coercion was very benign in our view, but okay, maybe it's difficult to China. We led to establish Taiwanese representative office in Lithuania, and we disengaged from Belt and Road, so-called 17+1 cooperation framework. And that was the trigger. And actually, that probably was a test case against smaller countries from China. And we survived, and GDP was growing all the time. And it's not so easy to exercise economic coercion, even against the smaller country.
Deividas, thank you. Always powerful to hear you speak from that, quite direct lived experience, and an insightful reframing there that we're talking about economic security. I like it both because it's insightful, also because it gives me the perfect segue to bring you in, Michito. So Japan, a country that is leading in terms of how it thinks on economic security and the extent to which it's structuring its bureaucracy and government to respond. How does Japan balance strategic autonomy with the need for trusted global partnerships, particularly, if I can highlight a couple of examples, semiconductors, advanced manufacturing?
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, and very pleased to be here this afternoon. Yes, Japan has been promoting the idea of strategic autonomy and strategic indispensability. So strategic autonomy is very much a defensive sort of approach, but the idea of strategic indispensability is more, I wouldn't call it offensive, but more proactive sort of a approach. So making Japan indispensable for others. So that means that it will become more difficult for other countries, whoever, to cut economic transactions with Japan. So that is what the Japanese government has been championing. But whether it's a strategic autonomy or indispensability, so more cooperation with like-minded countries is, of course, always important. But still, the things, sort of the national level things come first. Because partly because of the geographical location of Japan. So Japan is an island nation, so they're surrounded by the seas, which means that Japan very much depends on sea lines of communications. So we always try to secure our sea lines of communications together with the Americans, but something could happen. So we have drawn the sort of lessons from the COVID experience. So because of disruptions at the customs level, then it was really difficult during the COVID period that the flow of goods was very much affected. So that's why I think it's just natural to start thinking about national level, and then on top of that, yes, of course, we need to think more about cooperation with like-minded countries. But let me emphasize here that the national level things, that we need to do things at the national level first, and then, based on that, we can think of more international collaboration.
So let me pivot a little bit. Foreign-owned, controlled, or influenced components, be that hardware, software, raw materials. We're realizing each day the extent to which they're embedded deep in our critical system, sometimes more than we knew on first glance. It's forcing us to question how realistic is supply chain cleansing, if it is indeed an aspiration, and therefore where do the real bottlenecks lie? Maybe, Deividas, I'll bring you in first this time. Lithuania's exit from high-risk telecoms was unusually fast, might I suggest. What enabled that speed? Political clarity, regulatory design, or was it alliance support? Or something not listed?
Well, thank you so much for this question. Actually, I will start by saying that since independence of Lithuania, we have been always very devoted to economic security. We had a lot of issues related to over-dependence on Russian economy, on energy supplies, and we have a certain, higher vigilance when it comes to all threats coming to our economy, to our security. And therefore, I would say that you asked political clarity, regulatory design, or alliance support. And I think all three factors played an important role. And we introduced national legislation already 21. And this legislation was meant that we need to protect, investment into 5G network. And then we decided that only duly trusted producers and suppliers could participate in tendering process in, developing 5G infrastructure. And it's not country specific, I must admit. It's not specifically against any country or a group of countries. But we understood several risks in this respect. 5G is a critical infrastructure, and therefore we have to protect critical infrastructure. And then big data. We also need to protect big data. And we understood that there are some, in the world, some countries, our peer competitors, having a system of so-called civil-military fusion. And there are some obligations in some countries for civilian technological companies to cooperate very closely and to give information to military authorities. And therefore, we understood that it's a certain risk that it could be related to some leakage of information and even probably espionage activities using all the hardware of 5G. And then the second point was also related to critical infrastructure. In case of something is happening and a situation and relationship with one or another country is escalating, then the risk of disruption of technological, communication was evident. And then we decided that we should be vigilant and we should create some restrictions. And actually, we were among the first in the European Union, and some countries later followed us. At the same time, we also implemented European Union 5G cybersecurity toolbox of the European Union. And again, there was a certain coherence between our national view and European view. And, we are still having this legislation, and it seems working, and we are trying to protect our economic security.
Thank you, Deividas. Pastora, maybe to you. So let me start with a question, but call out the assumption. So let's assume that the arguments about untrusted vendors are convincing. If that's the case, how should policies be designed to effectively manage those risks? Are there steps that you've seen go beyond what is necessary and ultimately then end up being counterproductive?
No, thank you. And I want to follow on the ambassador comments. And actually, James, I want to reference the ASPI report on whose technology we trust.
All right, I already mentioned it, but no, please.
But I'm going to go a little deeper in what the ASPI report, I think, highlights the importance to set, and I think for industry predictability, and a framework that sets out what are the principles that we need to think when we talk about high-risk vendors, right? What is the ownership? What is the access to data? What are the jurisdictional oversight? And then those are the foundations to assessing high-risk vendors. But I think what you argue as well is that the outcome on which vendors are considered high risk doesn't necessarily need to be public, right? So there is transparency on the principles, but discretion on the outcomes. And I think that's actually important. But on your question about going beyond, right, what can be a little bit proposals that are counterproductive, I think one thing that, as we all know, supply chains are interdependent. And we've seen proposals that ban all technological components of a particular hardware equipment, for example. Yep. And we think it's important to look at what are the components that are intelligent, that pose a risk, versus the components that are commodities are low risk, yep. Right? If you yep. think about, semiconductor processors, obviously they are, intelligent components. If you think about the sand for a silica board, they are not. They are more commodity, right? So drawing that balance, I think it's important because obviously it can otherwise cause, supply chain disruptions, yep. increased costs, and let me just say, of course, we do understand that, like critical minerals and rare earth, that's critically important. So all of the agreements, like we had the US and Australia signing an agreement on critical earth, this is really important.
Yeah.
But that's also medium long term.
Yes.
So that's what I would say. And then the last point I would say it's about the cost. We've seen also sometimes in countries, particularly developing countries, when they go and choose high-risk vendors, it's also because of the financing. So I think I would say like-minded countries, as we talk, should maybe do a better job coordinating some of the financing for this upfront cost when you deploy technology.
Lovely. Now, just a bit of a warning to the audience. I'm going to ask Professor Michito one question, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. And I'll probably open it up where we do bundles of 2 or 3 questions just to maximize the time and get through, give you as much opportunity as possible. So, Michito, just Japan sits at the center of allied chips, materials, tooling ecosystems. What dependencies, in your view, do partners consistently underestimate?
I think when it comes to experts and officials working on these issues on a daily basis, that I don't think we overlook important things, or I don't think we underestimate.
I'd suggest experts
the
never
would. But the point here, what I would like to emphasize is that the going beyond a very small circle of experts and officials, then the level of awareness about what risks we have, it's still very low. So we need to reach out beyond our sort of a usual sort of pool of people. So that is still a challenge. And because in Japan, yes, the term and concept, economic security, is something that is already very much established. And Japan has been trying to establish this idea in the international context as well, like in the G7, when Japan was holding the G7 presidency back in 2023. So we introduced that to the G7 agenda. But the talking to business people in Japan, yes, in big companies, you have people working on economic security. But in medium and smaller sized companies, there's anyone who... for those people still that the economic security is seen as a new financial burden, so which is very much against business interests. But we need to go beyond this sort of understanding. And we need to understand that addressing economic security is for business, not for the sake of they're appealing to the government. No, that's not the case. That the economic security is for business. But I don't think we have reached that stage. So we need to do more outreach.
Thank you, Michito. Why don't we now open it up for questions from the floor? We've probably got about 5 to 10 minutes left. Again, if possible, for those with the mics, let's try and collect maybe 2 or 3 questions in bundles.
G'day, Stephen Halpin from Arch Cyber. I wonder if the panel might reflect on the fact that supply chains aren't a particularly static item. Underneath, things like warehousing and distribution, those can change, ownership can change, structures can change, and those are all at the business's determination. How does the policy framework keep up with this constantly shifting sand?
Maybe Pastora, would you be willing to start?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a good point, because even when you reflect about the security assurance, right, we have moved from a world where we were trusted on how we secure our products to a world where we need to constantly show how we secure our products, right? And that's evolving. There are updates. It's not a static review of the source code. And so I think, the frameworks and the policies have also evolved to recognize that this is a shifting and continuously assurance that we need to do. So I think that's a really valid point. I think also, frankly, given the geopolitics that are happening, a lot of companies are also looking about, trusted supply chains. And there is a lot of discussion also in the context of the trade agreements about how do we create, among like-minded countries, secure and trusted supply chain, what that does mean, right? From the critical minerals that is needed to the operational and the software that is underpinning the networks.
Michito?
From a bit different perspective, that the importance of manufacturing, so whoever owns what sort of manufacturing capability you have in your country, that matters a lot. Yeah, because the software innovation and new technology is good, of course, are all important, but without a capability to manufacture, to apply those new technologies to our life, then nothing can happen. So we have seen over the past several years that we've been sort of competing to get TSMC plants, so in Japan and in the United States and in Europe. So what sort of a manufacturing base you have, and that means also about engineers and workforce. So many countries, our countries, are facing the decrease of population. So it's getting more difficult to secure enough number of workers. So that is going to be more important. So yes, of course, the ownership issue is important, but what you have in your country, that matters still a lot. Sounds a bit traditional, but still, that's important.
Deividas, can I bring you?
Yeah, for small countries, definitely, we are also very dependent on supply chains. And in our view, the most important is to strive for diversity. This is the key word, diversity. And in this sense, we need to establish as much as possible connection with like-minded. I agree with you. With like-minded countries, with like-minded regions. And I simply say that, for example, the European Union and Australia should sign as soon as possible this agreement on critical materials and rare earth elements. So that would be also very important a sign that we will not be over-dependent on specific supply chains in countries which are using dependence of supply for political reasons. And we have to, as I said, diversification is the key in this respect.
Lovely. Thank you, Deividas. We're running out of time pretty quickly. Why don't we do a couple of questions now, and then I've got a bit of a 90-second lightning round for our panelists. So 2 questions from the audience, if I might. So we'll collect that one, and then one other as well.
Colin Clark with Breaking Defense. For a couple of decades, Europe marketed its space systems as ITAR-free. And the United States space industry faltered for decades because of it. Given China's enormous manufacturing capability plus control of large segments of the supply chain, can we actually do this? Or are we chasing our tails and we're all going to end up in a pile of butter at the bottom of the steak?
Okay. I'll come right back to that. One other question, and then I'll go to our panel.
Thank you, panel. Devon Whittle from Global Shield Australia. In a previous life, I negotiated free trade agreements for Australia, and I know they've been mentioned a few times. When I negotiated agreements, we were heading into this world of economic security, which kind of called into question the security guarantees that those agreements were meant to provide. So I'd welcome a perspective from the panel if the latest Trump administration's approach to its trade deals is undermining the value of these agreements, or how they need to change to protect supply chains and give business certainty. Thanks.
Okay, lovely. So just for our panel, a couple of questions there. Quite a simple one, but yet powerful. Can we actually do this? I do like the analogy of butter under the steak. And then, Devon, your question around where we would our approach to negotiating free trade agreements previously, where the Trump administration is at today. what does that mean for giving effect to these aspirations? Deividas, I might start with you and I'll go in reverse.
Yeah, well, I will start. I mean, Trump administration have free trade agreements and also, I mean, this the war on tariffs. Well, we have to understand that situation has changed and American policy has changed, and America first approach is evident, and we have to adapt to that. We have to accept that. Of course, we can criticize, but at the same time, well, the American administration will continue that, and we should somehow understand also that the globalization, as it used to be, is already past, and we have to accept new phenomenon of globalization 2.0 or something like that. I mean, it's based on trusted suppliers and also, I mean, economic security. And we will not probably be able to go back to the times of completely free trade. But on the other hand, we, I mean, as Europeans, should continue to deal with other parts of the world. I mean, trying to expand free trade zone, Mercosur, or Australia, and probably India in the coming years. And somehow we should look upon from different angle in this changing world. America is changing, and we have to adapt to that and to get most of the benefit of it. And the first question was, this was related probably to Chinese growing superiority. And yes, this is an issue. They are, surpassing United States and Europe in all, technological developments. And we have to, this is a wake-up call to all of us. If we want to continue to compete with America, not with America, but with China, then we have to definitely invest much more into research and development. And we have to increase oversight and control system. And definitely we have to invest into talents around the world. And if we take this challenge, maybe we are able to compete with China. But this is really a global issue. And of course, we have to admit that. Therefore, economic security, as I said, who has technological superiority, sooner or later will have geopolitical superiority. That's the fact.
Lovely. Professor Michito?
Yeah, maybe just on the trade agreements and leaving aside the tariffs discussion, what we are seeing on some of these new trade agreements is that actually it's an opportunity to deepen a technology partnership, whether it's the US-Japan or the US-EU. There is very helpful language there about alignment on new emerging technologies, whether it's quantum computing, AI, but also mutual recognition on some of the, for example, cybersecurity requirements, which is really very important, and very helpful language as well around trusted vendor and trusted supply chain. So I think I'm a half full glass kind of person, so I'm positive that it may be an opportunity to deepen the technology partnership and to address some of the market barriers.
Great. Professor Michito?
Yeah, two quick points. And one is about the trade-off between the ITER, in ITER and outside ITER. Yeah, because I understand that in AUKUS, that between the US, UK, and Australia, that you are now in the process of eliminating the barriers between the three countries. So the ITER exemption is there, but that will end up the increasing barriers to the outside world. So that's a sort of a difficult dilemma and trade-off. So I'm very much interested in this, and in Japan particularly, that the interest is really high on what sort of impact is this AUKUS process is going to have on Japan's relations with various AUKUS countries, including Australia. So, and the second point is about Trump. So it's really interesting that it seems that President Trump is genuinely interested in restoring American manufacturing, but the prospect is not really good. So, for example, if you look at the TSMC factory in Arizona, it depends a lot on Taiwanese workers there. So it's just a reality. So yes, they're investing more in the United States. Yes, from a US perspective, maybe very important, but you might end up relying more on foreign workers. So whether it's really what Mr. Trump intends, that's what we don't know. So the shipbuilding and other sectors as well. So yes, it's yeah. So still that we are in a very beginning phase of this, but I very much again wanted to emphasize the importance of manufacturing. But on what basis you can improve your manufacturing? That's yeah, really a great challenge.
Okay, we are out of time, but I'm going to ask one final question. There you go. That's doesn't make any sense, but bear with me. Short response from each of our panelists. If you could redesign one part of the global technology system, it seems like an easy question, right? To make sovereignty more secure, it's simple. What would you change first? Deividas?
Well, I think dependence on critical rare earth elements deliveries from authoritarian states. We have to change this and to have a diversity, as I said, as a principle in this respect, and to work to be more independent in this sense.
Great, thank you. Professor Michito?
We need to train more engineers and more skilled workers. And for that to happen, we need to make manufacturing more attractive for people.
So I agree with that. I did an arts humanities degree, and even I agree with that.
Actually, I'm going to go with a more practical. Silent vulnerability is obsolete aging technology. Almost 50% of the networking assets is relying on obsolete, out-of-date technology that cannot even be patched. So we really need collectively to work on that. Yep. Not to open the door for malicious actors by having unpatched technology.
Great. Lovely. With that, folks, can I ask you to please thank our panelists, Pastora Valero, Deividas Matulionis, and Professor Tsuruoka from Japan.